Which I mean.
Would you please stand, join me in the pledge?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I just want to remind everybody, this is a work session tonight. There's no voting action being taken. So first on our work session is mayor and council update. So start with council. Councilman Hahn.
Nothing this evening, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Stugel.
Thank you, Mayor. I also do not have any updates. I was ill during my liaison meetings of this month, so I will bring back reports at the next meeting.
Okay, thank you. Councilman Cox.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have two updates. LIDA, we met last week, had a good meeting, deciding strategic plan wise what the purpose and goals are for the next few years. They will be presenting that to council as well, but also in the process, they'll be meeting with Lyft, I think on Wednesday, yes, to talk about the future of that and what that looks like as far as funding goes. Really good meeting. We are looking for some new members of LIDA to join and just be a part of that. So if anybody's interested, please reach out. The next one is school district number 1. They've had a couple of meetings since we were here last. One is they're doing a community stronger connections grant that they will be looking at chronic absenteeism as well as stronger community connections. That funding, if awarded, will be March 1st start date. They've also opened up, and the press was there, a soft opening for a parent resource center that is located at the old North Building. This will house various resources and services for families, parents, and students as well. Matt Jacobson is leading that. And let's see, they talked about the banners, so thank you guys for doing that. They did not have any hesitation with their folks putting those banners up for the seniors, and a couple of really nice presentations from 2 seniors that were very gracious and thankful for the council for allowing that to continue on. And that is all for my update.
Okay.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Hahn.
I have nothing, Mayor. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilman White.
Thank you, Mayor. A couple of things. The Planning Commission did not meet in in the interim from this. There was nothing on the agenda there. There's a statewide housing task force that I've been a part of, and we're meeting tomorrow morning to talk about some of the things that are happening at the state legislature. I just got a notice that a $5 million budget item has so far continued to pass into the session isn't open yet, but to be able to assist with funding needs, housing needs in communities, and including the ability to purchase land for that, which is great. Likewise, on a state level, I was asked to serve for the priority rating model as a subcommittee that Wyoming Aeronautics has put together about how the different communities are prioritized for getting air service and how the state local match works, et cetera. The first meeting's likely to be probably no earlier than the end of February, but looking forward to seeing how that can be adjusted. So that is it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Larson.
Yes, Mayor, thank you. No updates as per se, but I was just curious, and where this is a work session, maybe sometime during the night, we can talk about how it went from, that it was unsafe and everything else for the senior banners to be put up to now it's good. I'm all for it, but I just wonder what made the change. That's all I've got.
Okay. Thank you. Okay, moving on. have stuff, but I'll wait till the next meeting. Go to staff updates, Chief?
I don't really have an update. I'll be talking forever probably to you here in a few minutes. So we'll do it then.
Okay, thank you. Hunter?
Ann and I and Jason with Parks met with the Wind River Job Corps today. Actually, we met a couple times, but for several projects in town, they've been looking at doing more things over here in Lander. They've been doing some projects in Riverton, so they're looking to start on a project over at the City Park Hermansky property to start just clearing out some scrub brush and Russian olives and kind of give some more clarity for safety for police to be able to see in there and just fire protection in there too. So there'll be a press release coming out about that here soon, but that's kind of what's going on over there is giving them a project. They'll be there for a couple of weeks out there working on that stuff over there. So,
Good.
yeah, there's several more projects in the hopper for them too. So hopefully this one works out and it's a good way to work with them on that. And then the price to us is just fuel for their equipment out there for that. So, we had another motor grader go down today. So we're down to one motor grader in town. So we were catching up in streets. We're going to take a little bit of a lull. So hopefully the weather cooperates with us on that too. That's all.
Question for, go ahead, Missy.
Yeah, Hunter, I love the idea of Job Corps working on the city park expansion. Can they do the same on Paposia River Park along the riverbed there and do some fire protection cleanup as well?
Yeah, I think this one was a low hanging fruit of a project they could mobilize on and a good first run with the city of Lander, at least for my tenure here with what this looks like. Also, it's the most dense and thick in there and probably
Yeah.
first one to hit with that one too. So.
Yeah, it is really thick. That's great they're doing that. Also want to say, I really appreciate all the efforts the city's put out about keeping taps running, even though it's warm, that actually increases the need to keep the taps running. It pushes the frost down. So thanks for keeping that out in the public.
Yeah, that's actually a great point. Thank you. There are people that are turning their water off, like even this week, it's just getting nicer and they are freezing up as they're doing that. So it is not time to turn your taps off to relay that message.
Mayor?
Councilman Larson?
Yeah, just one more question. I'm just curious if that was the new grader that went down or the other one?
No, it's our newest one is still up and running. So
Good deal, good
yep.
deal.
One was user error and one was just some parts went out on it. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Anybody else? Shari?
I put at everyone's, see, what we had printed up for the SRF, information. We'll be taking this down to SLIB next week when we meet with the elected officials on Tuesday, Wednesday, and with SLIB, and then Thursday, the meeting is at 8 o'clock. On the back of it, Kevin did notice one mistake that we missed, and the proposed water rates, that last box should be 2028. We have 2027 in there twice, but that last box on the back side should be 2028. So if you have any questions.
Go ahead. Councilman Hunt?
So the rate changes on the water and sewer and everything, is that to cover the possibility of payments on this infrastructure plan, or is it just raising rates?
No, these will be loans. We hope we do get some forgiveness, but it's at 0.25 interest. So we will have a loan payment every year and they will increase as we go along. So those increases are to be able to cover the debt to make payments on these loans.
Okay. And how long is a loan like that? Is it
20 years.
20?
Yeah. So we have about 5 right now, which they just changed the interest rate to the one. They haven't sent us the loan documents yet, but the interest rate went to 1.5%. I told them I wanted to keep the payments the same as what we were paying when it was 2.5%, so that we'll get them paid off sooner. So ideally what will happen is about the time all of these are finished, we'll be finishing those next set of loans. So if the city was in the right position at the right time, they could then go after more projects for, another 5-year period. So our debt, how it works is once, like the first ones that we have in 2024, if awarded, then we would advertise these, award the bid, purchase it by 6/30/24, and then the first loan payment wouldn't be due until 1 year after your completion. So you effectively don't start a loan payment on a closed project until 1 year after the closed project.
Else? None? Adam?
I don't have anything tonight. Thanks.
Michelle?
I just wanted to mention that the city is advertising for the part-time temporary employee to help with the photocopying and scanning that council approved. I want to say probably in May, no later than June last year. We tried to see if we could have some other employees fill in and do that as they were on different schedules than their normal schedule and things of that nature. They didn't get as far as we'd hoped, so we're now looking for that person to do that. So if you know of anyone, send them my way.
You have a
Me-
question? Go ahead.
Just a question, actually, just a request. Shari, this is really helpful. Do you mind dropping the electronic version, the PDF in our file tonight? We'd love to be able to share it around. Thanks.
We actually do have printouts. We put some on real heavier and then we did it on heavier paper than like paper so that we could, if we're awarded, we could put them out in the front lobby. What we're hoping is Monday, I'm going to meet with Ann. We're going to work on a proposed announcement so that if we get awarded that on Thursday, then right off, we're letting everybody know that we were awarded that and we'll put that out to the media.
Okay, move on. The most exciting thing tonight will be this Byron Brown with the Summit West CPA. You can come up here, Byron. Right up here. You can turn the mic on. Yeah. You done?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, there's still,
Okay. We good now?
you're good.
Perfect. As Mayor Richardson said, the most exciting part is myself, Brian Brown with Summit West CPA Group here in Lander. I've been in Lander for about 14 years now, and I've worked on the City of Lander audit almost all 14 of those. I think that when I first started here, I was put on this engagement when I didn't really know what to do and got told, hey, balance this and balance that. So I'm pretty familiar with the way that things work. I've worked with Shari pretty regularly during that time period. And I appreciate you guys continuing to have a partnership with us and working with us as your auditors. I requested that Shari put me on a work session versus a normal meeting in order for you guys to all get a chance to see the financials for at least a month or so. And if you had any specific questions, I thought it would be better than having just breeze over it. So again, I'm open to any questions that we have there in the financial statements. One other thing I was going to mention is I've never ran water in the city of Lander, but I do have 3 daughters. So there's probably enough water at my house being done that I don't think I need to do that. Right?
Yeah.
We'll see. We'll see what happens. Anyway, so again, we were engaged to do the audit for the financial statements and a single audit, which for those of you that don't know, if the city expends more than $750,000 in federal awards in any given year, then you're subject to additional compliance and reporting requirements with the federal government. The city historically, since the last that I can remember, well, there's been 1 year that you guys didn't have that 750, but with all these new loans and grant agreements, there's always a federal portion in there that requires you to do that. So this year, let me find exactly the total amount that we have for federal awards. The city expended total 3.9 million in 2023 in federal expenditures. A big portion of that, which was the major program that we audited. Again, when you are subject to a single audit, we do a determination on type A and type B major programs. And the airport improvement program is the one that got picked as a major program for auditing this year. I would like to say that we didn't have any findings or in compliance with that major program. So no federal audit grant grant findings, which Shari was pleased to hear about. And again, pleased from our perspective to make sure that all that agreement is taken care of. I do heed caution on all this other money, last year with the COVID money that came through and all the art, there's a lot of compliance requirements and some of this new funding that's coming out. Just be aware of any of that tags that are federal portions on there too, because it's sometimes at the nth hour that we realize that there is some federal pieces on there. So I think it's good to keeping that in front of that side of things. So as far as a little bit, I guess, I don't want to go through all 68 pages of this stuff, but I will touch on a couple highlights here. Our job as auditors is to give an opinion on the financial statements, whether they're free of any material modifications. If we have to come in here and make any material adjustments to the numbers that we get presented, and then provide an opinion on those. The highest level of opinion that we can give is an unmodified opinion saying we don't have any adjustments, any modifications that are material to the financial statements. So again, in 6/30/2023, Summit West did provide an unmodified opinion to the City of Lander's financial statements, meaning highest level of assurance that we can give that the numbers that we were presented are accurate and we didn't have to make any big changes to make them in compliance with GAAP standards and so on and so forth. We've talked a little bit about the way that management uses reports and the council uses reports versus how we present some things. So Shari and I have been back and forth a little bit on what we determine as special revenue funds, what we determine should be a general fund expenditure and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, I think we all get back to these financials and get it to where it needs to be. So our reports on these financials might look a little different than what you're looking at seeing because we do combine some things. For general fund purposes that she might have, or she or the city might have split out for special purposes, optional 1 cent sales tax being a separate thing in her reporting, and we combine it in some stuff here and so on and so forth. But a couple of the highlights that we will go over as far as, there's useful pieces of these financials for different purposes. The major part of if the city were to go out and get bonding or debt financing for anything like that, they're going to look at a different set of these financials than what a management function would use on some of it, right? So this first page of statement of net position and statement of activities shows the city as a whole with all your infrastructure, this building, streets, roads, equipment, the loader that or the grader that
Right.
Hunter had mentioned that went down and so on and so forth.
Brian, if
That's
I can you give us the page number you're looking at?
Oh, yeah, you bet. That's gonna be 12 and 13. This is what, if the city wanted to go get bonding, if they wanted to get rated for a bond, the bonding company is gonna rate you based off pages of like 12 and 13, your entire city as a whole, right? What that looks like. At the end of the day, if you look at what net position is, city's got $47.8 million in net position in that aspect. That's including everything that we're talking about here. It also includes things that are actuarially driven, like the net pension liability. So the amount that all city employees owe, they come out with a proportionate share that the city of Lander would be responsible for. So it's got some factors in there that really you have no control of. If you guys look through the financials and you saw some increases in debt to that, that's all actuarial driven. So there's no, you could do your day-to-day operations and that liability can go from $1.2 million 1 year to $4 million, depending on how investments and things kind of fared. So that's why I don't care so much for these two statements for people like the normal management of the city and city council, because they don't have a lot. The next page is though 14 and 15. This is like if you were running any other business. This is just like your balance sheet and your income statement. So if you were to look at what the city made as far as revenues over expenditures for the year from 7/1/2022 to 6/30/2023, you had positive net income of 1.47 million, right? So that's great. That's probably one of the highest that I've seen in the time that I've audited the city. Again, that's overall increase to what you would call your unassigned fund balance to the general fund, putting money to the bottom line. There is some restrictions on some things, as you guys know. when there's committed funds for optional sales tax, when there's assigned funds for retirees and equipment and so on and so forth. But when you look at this page 14, a big part that I like to look at there is that fund balance. So saying that the city in its general operations has about $12 million to spend, 5.5 million being unrestricted. 4.6 million of it is committed to the optional sales tax money that's come in. A big part of that is projects that are ongoing, or on the shelf to be ongoing once this matching funds comes in. Some special projects and some other money set aside for retirees and equipment upgrades. But again, if you guys have any questions for me specifically, we can go over that. The management discussion analysis, that first 3 to 9 pages 3 to 9, that's probably, pages 4 to 9. That's going to be the best read if you wanted to go through and actually get a feel for the overall financial highlights and health of the city. Okay. The rest of the stuff is GAAP compliance requirements and stuff that you have to put forth, some footnote disclosures and so on and so forth. But other than that, do we have any specific questions?
Councilwoman Cox?
Thank you, Mayor, and thank you for your time and your effort in this. It reads well, it's all of those things. It is not that boring. It's actually fascinating. But on page 39, and you briefly covered it, I think, and skimmed over it as far as just your comments tonight, but we talk about our debt.
Uh-huh.
And so my concern is, and that's in reference to, I'm getting to it, page 39, I believe, council. Yeah, I'm just making sure yes, legal debt. Is it legal debt margin? Is that right?
Yep, on the bottom of
Yep.
39 there.
And so right above that is the Maven project. And, initially that project was what, 1.9 million or something, and then it jumped up to 3. My concern is, that's included in the report. Is the audit concerned with our debt margin?
Shari and I discussed this a little bit, especially stuff going forward. If you look at the subsequent event footnote, we talk about in the minutes, the city talked about the retirement home that's going forth, right? The pusher retirement home. Her and I discussed a little bit on some of those slip loans, and that's what brought this merit to this attention, is this assessed valuation in the 4%. As I looked into it a little bit more, and Adam, I don't practice law, so the statutes are a little bit vague on if it's referring to specifically like that chapter at 14, which would be improvements, city improvements. I don't know if it's chapter 15, but I don't know if that retirement center falls into that and is subject to those same limits. But if it is, my interpretation would be that you couldn't exceed over 4% of the assessed valuation for the debt for that year. So, if we looked at the assessed valuation and rounded it up to $100 million for 2023, we're at 99,750. Then you couldn't create and exceed over 4%, so $4 million in debt for that year. Okay, so again, I think there would need to be some interpretation and clarification on whether or not that falls into that chapter 15 of that statute, but that's what that's referring to specifically.
So the follow-up question to that would be then, so you said within that year, so does the Maven project then go from last year and then we start over, or is it the continuation of your debt?
I would think I'd have to look into that for sure to let you know, Melinda, on whether or not it's the complete debt for the entity itself on that 4%. And Adam, I don't know if you know off the top of your head on that side of things, but the way that it reads is that it cannot exceed 4% of the assessed valuation within that year, whether that includes existing debts as well. Because again, if you're at $3 million with the Maven loan on the city's books this year, that doesn't leave a lot of, and there is still a little business loan with a chamber that's on the books for $132,000. So general fund obligations right now for just those two loans together is 3.13.
So potentially in the event that we were to build the memory care or the assisted living or whatever, that could push us over the.
Yeah,
4%.
could potentially, again, I don't know on the statute specifically if that falls into that improvement section of that or not, but
And-
yeah,
and-
the way that I understand it. for
And if
sure.
I can, there are some exceptions, and I've been doing some research on that. Right now, without giving too much weight, because I'm still doing the research, it doesn't appear that would go under improvements because it could be considered part of housing. And so we could still move forward with the memory care unit up there, but I'm working with the AG's office on that and a few other people to get some clarification on it right now.
Yeah, and Shari and I had discussed it too, and I know there's other municipalities in the state of Wyoming, City of Laramie, City of Sheridan, all have these similar type projects. And I've never researched enough to know what the assessed valuation is for the city of Sheridan to see if they're in excess of those in any given year, but I would imagine in there, if we were to pull their audit report, we
Yeah.
could determine that or not.
Councilman White?
Thank you, Mayor. So I think the difference with the Maven, and I'm looking at page 4, the bottom of page 4, since the Maven loan is a non-recourse debt obligation, and what's stated here, because it's a non-recourse debt obligation, it does not count towards the statutory debt limits. Meaning if Maven defaulted on it, we don't lose the money, we gain a building. It's not like other debt obligations that we might have. So I was pleased to see that statement there because that's one of the questions we've had, that does it count or not? And I was very pleased to see that specificity was called out.
Here's, oh, thank you, Mayor. I see that too, but I struggle with that because you gain a building, but I mean, so in that sense, you feel like we gain the property and not the debt.
We have no debt.
Yeah,
In
I don't have
fact,
the grant-
in the
debt agreement.
repayment of that, we end up making money on it, which is beneficial to the city. This will be designated towards economic development.
Right, that's the
So,
intention. If that should go awry or if something should change, would we collect the recapture?
My understanding is what we get is the building in lieu of the money.
Thank you.
All right. Any other questions for Byron? Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Hey, you bet.
Appreciate it.
Did you guys all read it? Did y'all go through it? Yeah, good. Perfect.
I admit, I kind of skimmed the last few pages. I didn't pay quite as much attention to those. When I got to page like 58, I started scrolling a little faster.
Well, it's good.
Yeah.
It's always good to come over and harass Shari for a week or two and make sure that things are on the up and up around here. So I appreciate you guys doing
Appreciate you guys.
everything that you do.
Well, thank you very much. Great job. Okay, up next, Chief Peters. You can come up if you like. We can't see you back there hiding.
I'll try not to make this too long, but I can't guarantee that. So, especially when we get into data. As you all know, we've been talking ever since I've been here almost 2.5 years, is I've really been big on data. Because to me, I know the whole argument where people say data is not the whole story, but you know what? In my opinion, data actually is a huge it opens up transparency. So you actually see, it takes out the aspect of opinions. Because kind of like if you think about the concept of, if you can ask 5 officers, where's our worst area of town? And you'll probably get 4 different answers. So in turn, but the data shows us what it is, and it also shows us how to focus our enforcement and how to actually drive down the crime. That's where I told you I was excited. I am a data geek, as you guys know. I try not to overflow you with too much, but tonight I'm going to. So, so to start off, you guys got I wanted to put a PowerPoint together, but like everything else, here we are without it. So you guys have the statistics sheet in your packet, I do believe, right? Okay, so before we get started, during the year, just so you know, just kind of a brief cap for the year, we had no turnover. So we didn't lose any officers this year. When you look at what's going on in law enforcement and around the country and also around the state, I'd be hard pressed to ask, I don't think there'll be another agency that went like what we have for the full year. Now, I don't think that's a coincidence. The reason why is, thank you as a council, because since I've been here, you've been very supportive of in every aspect of improving our police department. In the last 3 years or 2.5 years, we've upgraded the quality of life. And everybody talks about quality of life and they're like, well, you know what, they feel good. No, there's more to that. The aspect is the council helped get the pay up to what it needs to be for Lander to be acceptable. And then on top of that, we've been able to update all our equipment. 2.5 years ago, our equipment was ancient. So in turn, when it comes to law enforcement, a lot of people don't realize, but that's actually very important to law enforcement. To know that, when I go into work, I don't have to worry about my car breaking down. I don't have to worry about my gun being 15 years old. I don't have to worry that my vest might be getting close to expiring because if anything happens, that's my safety net. So there's a niche in law enforcement that it's hard to explain sometimes to other folks, but that's the quality of life stuff. Also, we promote health, that we got the gym in there. I mean, everybody uses the gym. I got one employee I'm trying to motivate a little bit, but everybody else uses that thing religiously. So thank you for what you do there. Also during the year, we did end up with one new employee, that's Captain Waugh, came on here at the end of December. He's doing a great job. I mean, he's hitting the ground running. He brings a lot of experience. So we just had to fine tune him to what Lander and our expectations in this agency a little bit, but he fits right in because he spent the majority of his career in Sheridan, and Sheridan was the first agency to put into place what we're doing here when it comes to DDAX. So I've never actually said DDAX, data-driven approach to crime and traffic safety prevention. But we're using the same type of form, so he's used to that and he knows exactly what my thinking is with it. So, all right. So let's get into the statistics and then we'll talk about what the plan is for the coming year. Where I told you it'd be exciting in the statistics is, after 2.5 years, we kind of got a good base of data. When I first came in, there's always been records in Lander, but the problem is records are only as good as they're coded. So when it comes to calls, how people put it in there, how they used to do it in the past is very confusing and it was hard to pull records. That's why you see when I put the year in reviews for going back years, some of them might have 4 years, some of them might have 3 years. The reason why is because if I can't get good data, then I didn't put that in. So really, when you're looking at it, calls is the longest one. So the calls are what 5 years back. That's the one that I know I can trust is accurate. Everything else, what you see is what I know is accurate when it comes to the data. So if you look at the second page, this is where I want to actually start off, is self-initiated activity. So we're up 26% this year in self-initiated activity. What that is that's officer-initiated activity, whether it's a traffic stop, whether it's, anything officially documented when it comes to the public. Now, we deal with a lot more people than what that number is, but that's what we know for sure that's actually documented. And ultimately, that is what we want. The whole aspect of driving down crime and keeping down crime is through high visibility enforcement. So the folks know we're out there. It's kind of like I had somebody ask me the other day, every time I drive through Lander, I always see your officers. Now that's what we want, and we'll get into the numbers to explain how we're being fair. We're not that high visibility, and that extra activity is not leading into punishing citizens like some people want to say, or we're brutal or we're doing anything like that. The data will show you that we're not. But what it comes down to is the more high visibility, the more they see us, the less prone that we're going to have people want to come into our community and commit crimes. When you look at the numbers, 93% of our crime is imported. So what that means is that only 7% of our crime in Lander is from Lander residents. Everything else is either people filtering through or whatever we got going on. Our number one crime, I mean, it's no shock, is theft. By far is our number one crime. The hard thing with that one, I'm still trying to figure that out. The majority of our theft is retail. So we do have people breaking into cars. We do have that aspect to it. But the majority of our theft that's reported is coming out of our businesses. It's coming out of Mr. D's, it's coming out of Safeway. So there's that side of how do we enforce, we can't be in a grocery store. So we got to figure that one out. But you'll see that that actually has gone down when we get into the numbers too, which I don't think is a coincidence. So our activity is up 26%. Our total activity, when you add self-initiated activity, is up 26%. The total activity, which that includes calls. The reason why we include calls, I mean, calls is not self-initiated. That means somebody called in and we're obligated to go to those calls. If you look at that, we're up 15%. So if we come back to the first page, traffic stops. So in 2022, we had 2,817 stops. This year, we had 3,206. So that's up 13% in the last year. If you look at it in comparison to 2020, we're up 60%. So when we get into this, just remember the self-initiated activity and the traffic stops, and then we're going to watch how we're actually, I always say the algorithm, and you guys looked at me like I'm crazy. There's an algorithm, or at least in my mind, when it comes to law enforcement. Activity should lead to decrease in stuff. So the higher the activity, the calls should go down. So if you look down right below it, in 2022, we had 4,739 calls. That actually spiked if you look in comparison to 21, but that was directly related to warrants, and we'll get to warrants. What happened last year? The warrants spiked in the warrant arrests after COVID, and in turn, that drove up our calls mostly. So we go to citations. So the traffic stops are up 13%. We're up 60% since 2020. Well, if you look at it, we're up 4% in citations this year. So our traffic went up 13%, but our citations only went up 4%. So that, to me, that shows that we're being fair. The one thing that went into play this year is e-ticket. So our e-ticket went in, and the fear in a lot of communities when e-ticket goes in is, oh my gosh, the officers, since now they have the ability to issue 5 citations on one electronic form really quickly without having to write them, citations are going to go through the moon because they're just going to punish our citizens. Actually, you'll see, since we instituted e-ticket, if you go to warnings right there, our warnings are up 130%. So that shows that the officers and the institution of e-ticket didn't roll into massive ticket writing to citizens. What it did is it ended up massive warning issuing to citizens. So that's what we want. Ultimately, in the end, it's not about punishing the public. It's not about writing that citation. It's about being visible out there. And it's also about preventing crime and also educating the public when it comes to the traffic stops, left turn or whatever the violation is. It's showing that the officers are not going to the side of punishing. They're going to the side of educating when it comes to warnings. All right. Calls for service, I kind of talked about that. We're down 5%, which that's actually where we should be. Where last year it got skewed. It got skewed with the warnings. So in turn, that's about right. Really, for about every 10% increase in activity, you should be down about 5% in calls. So that's lining right up with what it should be. Parking, you'll see parking went down, which I'm perfectly fine with that. The reason why you saw the spike in 2021, we had 157 parking tickets issued. For one, we didn't have code enforcement. So code enforcement went into effect mid-year in 2021. In 22, you saw how we just went up dramatically. Went up 327. Well, last year we made a point, and it was my kind of push. We had people parking everywhere. I don't know if you caught on to that last year, we had people wrong way on every street. It was chaos. So in turn, we had to try to get that under control. So it was an initiative of, hey, you know what, take the time and let's get these cars parked right and let's get our roads cleaned up to where, you know what, we don't have issues. This year it went back down to 276. Majority of our parking tickets are actually issued during the tourist season. We try to work with folks, but there's an aspect of folks coming in from back east that just don't care. And I hate to say it, I had more than a few that say, you know what, I'll take the parking ticket to go get my hamburger because your parking ticket's $15 and back in Chicago it's 75. So you know what, it's cheaper than parking, kind of concept. Our DUIs are up 17% this year. So we had 66 last year. We're up to 79. That goes with the territory. Because if you look at it, our stops are up 13%. Normally you're stopping cars, you're going to get more DUIs. The one thing I'm actually, when I first came, I guess from being years in Riverton, I thought, my gosh, we're not doing our end on DUIs here. These numbers are way too low. Well, you know what? After being here for 2.5 years, and also watching the historic numbers for Lander, I think this is what the average is when it comes. I'm sure we're missing some because I mean, the average is you catch 1 out of 83 drivers that drives impaired. Yeah, who knows where they got those stats, but in turn, I think we're running right in with what's normal. And then also this year, which at the end, if I don't talk too long and you tell me to get the heck out of here, I was going to go over the DUI team numbers too, so you can see that. But as you know, we put a lot of effort into impaired driving in the last year. So you'll see countywide, everything's going down. Good things are happening in the DUI and keeping our roads safe and our fatalities dropping too. So warrants, last year we had 235 warrants. That's COVID. After COVID, there was a lot of warrants issued for people not going to court during the COVID time. So in turn, that's why we spiked so high last year, is that literally the courts reopened, everything got going, and in turn, we started running into folks. And that's directly related to our activity. When our activity goes up, we run into a lot of people. And if you got an active warrant, which there's a ton in Fremont County, that's why it went up right there. But this year we're down 40%. We're back to what it should be, really. I mean, when you look at it, you might have years, but normally the averages for a police department, I would believe in Lander is about that number, about 140 to 150 range. Animal calls were down a little bit, but as you see, and when we get into code enforcement activity, Sean is extremely busy. So I've had more than a few people, they get upset over codes, you're not doing anything. Actually, you'll see Sean's working his tail off. We're getting our money's worth out of him. So it's down from 464 to 440. So the code parking, what that is actual people that called in. So that means that's official calls. That's not initiated by Sean. And I'll clear that up when we get in the activity. So that's down from 123 to 104. VIN checks. Number one call we go to in Fremont or in Lander, sorry. That's the number one call that we take. That's just the nature of the beast. Folks come over to register their cars. They don't have a VIN check. I don't know why our numbers are so high. The only thing I can suspect is that, at the sheriff's office must not have availability of somebody in the building. So in turn, they just come up a block to us, which is perfectly fine when it comes to our gym fund. But we had 640 of them. And the funny thing is, if you look at those numbers, they don't move when it comes to VIN checks. It's the oddest thing. You think you'd fluctuate, right? Well, in 2021, we had 650, in 22, we had 646, and this year we had 640. So literally, it's like right on the button. So I think we can probably anticipate next year we'll have 646 probably. And we could almost guess that one right. Let's get into part 1 crimes. This is the one that actually, out of all the statistics, this is the one that really shows the safety of our community. I talked about it last year, if you remember, about how our crime index is skewed. Because a few years back when they changed larceny to theft, in turn, that creates all of our theft falls into, or sorry, confuse it, larceny, it falls into a Part 1 crime. So in turn, if you look at this year, we had 218 Part 1 crimes, but let's dissect that out. Of that, 199 of them were theft. So really, if you look at it, we only had 19 Part 1 crimes. And Part 1 crimes are murder, forcible rape, aggravated assault, robbery, burglary, larceny, motor vehicle theft, and arson. So when you think of the hierarchy of crime, that's your Part 1 crimes. We had 19 in Lander last year, which is down from 27 the year before. So we're down 30%. So not only are we increasing our activity, you're seeing our crime going down, and our serious crime just dropped by a third in Lander here in the last year. So, you know, if anybody ever says Lander's not a safe town, you know, I'll argue with them on that one for sure. And the numbers actually show it. When we add the theft in, then that skews the numbers. So long story short, what it comes down to is when you look at our Part 1 or our crime index, Lander's probably going to be about a 26 to 28 range. Really, we should be about a 3.5 when it comes down to it. So it really doesn't affect us because we live here, but this is just an aspect. If you're moving into the community, some people look at that as of that crime index side, kind of like what you see, what just came out not too long ago, which I don't know why it came out early. Reporting doesn't get finalized till like March, but there was an article that went out about Riverton being the unsafest place in Wyoming. Well, somebody just made that up because there's no way the data is actually in for the year to be able to officially say that, so. But if you look at that Lander historically, before I came here, I looked at the crime index and I was thinking, there's no way Lander's that high, because Lander was ranked about the 4th most dangerous community in Wyoming. And when I got here, it's not even close. I think we're on the opposite side, so.
Missy has a question for you.
Yeah, two things, Chief. One is, what's the dollar amount that leads to theft being a Part 1 crime? Is there a dollar threshold that has to be reached, or any theft?
It's the charge,
Okay, wow. So you think about
so.
how many mountain bikes are swiped.
And Missy, for it to be a felony, it's $1,000 more in the aggregate, which
Okay,
is, I assume, is what you're talking about, is felony versus misdemeanor.
Yeah, and when it comes to our reporting, it doesn't distinguish between a felony or a misdemeanor on that side.
okay.
So,
But,
because it doesn't, 'cause
with-
right now, Part 1 doesn't say felony theft.
Yeah, with the amount of recreational toys that are abundant through Lander, that's a pretty easy threshold. The other one, it seems like this would be pretty important information to share with the chamber and realtors as well, to educate folks who might be coming here that the current facts are a bit misleading, and help them be well-versed in explaining what it really means. Because Lander is generally a very, very safe place.
Oh,
So-
it is. So I'll just breeze through the rest. The domestics are down. What domestics are actually physical domestics where somebody was arrested. So that's down from 39 and 22 to 30 this year. Family fights are just us being called to an actual fight, which is a verbal argument. It's nothing physical. This is the one that irritates me. After all this traffic enforcement and how big I am on DUIs and crashes, our crashes are up. That's really the only category you're going to see up right here. And but it's been identified, the issue. So we're up from 239 to 249. So we're up 4%. But it's been identified that 60% of our crashes occur between 5th and Main and the junction. So you know what, that shows that it's become a focus. I don't know if you've been out in the last few days. You might have saw folks stopping people on Main Street. That's the focus of where we're focusing. We identified the problem and now we're allocating our resources to what the problem is. And that's where the software comes in handy, that we're able to get, you know, through the grant this last year or a year and a half ago, sorry, is it been able to identify, and we're able to map our crime and actually allocate our resources appropriately. So you'll see a lot more focus on Main Street to drive that down. Custodial arrests are down 2% from 444 to 438. What custodial are is actual, I mean, somebody actually was physically arrested and taken to the detention center. So, public intox, this is where Chris is not on the council anymore, but he'd be happy. But we're down 13%. So you'll see a steady decrease, sorry, from 21, we had 260 or 162, 22, we had 159. And then this year we had 139. So it's going down when it comes to public intoxication arrests. No fatal crashes, thank goodness. And then when you go to the next one, arrests are, because a custodial arrest are, you're actually physically arrested and taken to the jail. But there's other times that you're technically arrested by the charge, but you're just not, for whatever reason, you're not a danger to the community or whatever we determined, we just didn't take you to the detention center. That was down 11% from 589 last year to 527 this year. And then use of force. So if you look at our total activity for this last year, it was 13,461. That's our total contacts. Those are between our calls and our self-initiated activities. So documented, we dealt with that many people. We only had 17 use of forces. So what a use of force is a physical application, whether it's a taser, whether it's, an arm bar to take them down. So where we actually had to use physical force besides just normal dealing with somebody. So we only had 17 instances, 17 cases of that. And of that, if you figure it out into percentages, I can't even figure the math out. It's literally 0.0012%. So I don't know if that's 12/100ths of 1% or what, but it's low enough that ultimately, not only are the guys out there working hard, they're being fair when it comes to citations, they're being fair when it comes to warnings. They're also not being forceful in our enforcement. Yep. And that comes into, did you guys have the one with training on there? Do you have training hours on yours? Okay, so I printed the wrong one off. I don't have it. But you'll see, I talked about it. It's big when I first came about, we need to get trained. Besides all our equipment getting up, we need to get the most current training. Well, you're seeing in the statistics on how we're operating that the training is coming through. We've invested a lot in the department in the last 2.5 years. I mean, we went up from, I believe it was 700 a few years ago. And in the last 2 years, we actually beat our training hours by 3 hours? 1,500 plus. Yeah, so you'll see our training has, since 2.5 years ago, our training has doubled. That actually pays off. I know a lot of the times, training budgets in departments get cut because when it comes to budgets, you look at it, well, you know what? Training might not be necessarily the most important. It is, especially not just training, the proper training, in getting folks trained correctly and getting them trained in what they need to be.
Yeah.
So you're.
I was gonna say, that's also impressive, noting with such minimal turnover, if any, then it means it's not reiterating trainings for new staff. It's existing staff getting further and more sophisticated in their training. So to me, that's even more impressive than the numbers staying high. It's that the same staff are now getting more intensive trainings.
That and getting specialized. I mean, the last 1.5 years, I mean, we've had a DRE, a drug recognition expert. One of our officers went through that school. So we're getting specialized training in different areas. And also, when it goes to the quality of life I'm real big on, what do you guys want? Now, when I first came and I asked that question, nobody answered me. They guess they thought it was a trick. But literally, I believe in, this career is hard enough. I mean, it's brutal sometimes what we deal with out on the streets. It's a hard job, hard hours, hard on the family, all around. It's not conducive to be, jumping off the walls, always happy. But you know what, when you come to work, can we get you into something that you want to specialize in? Where I believe after 2.5 years now, they're opening up a little bit more. I think maybe they might trust me. Not positive yet. But now they're coming forward, and we're actually able to get them into what they want to get into. Go ahead, Dan.
Any particular phase of training that it kind of surprises you that they're looking at and say, geez, you really want to do that?
Actually, but we did have one officer want to go to hostage negotiation training. That one astonished the tar out of me because I've never seen anybody want to volunteer for that.
Hmm.
That equates right back to an officer wanting to be specialized, trained in domestic violence. I
Yeah.
mean, no officer wants that.
The training, it benefits not only the officer, but it benefits the public.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a win for everybody. Properly trained. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay. I told you I'll talk forever here. So code enforcement activity, we're down just a hair. So calls wise, that means folks actually calling in. We went from 587 to 553. Violation notices, these are actual notices, which I list them out below. That's what Sean actually issues. The notice is what you hang on it. So like trailer parking violations, we hung 226 this year. Vehicle parking violation notices 194, grass, lawn and snow violations 88. So that totals up to 508. The one good thing, which is Lander's a great community when it comes to compliance. If you look at that, out of the 508 notices, we had a 96% compliance rate on the first notice. So that means that 96% are taking care of the problem and we don't have to take it any further. And then the detective division, we had 60 felony cases this year. We had 61 last year. And our clearance rate's 85% when it comes to it. So and with clearance rate, I mean, you can get into all different types of clearance rate. It can get complicated, but ultimately what it comes down to is it where the case is solved, or the case is filed, or the case is proven to be unfounded possibly. And what ultimately the missing in the clearance rate are what's still active. So out of those 60 cases, I believe we have, I think 8 still active, 7 still active. But those can get cleared later too. So.
Mayor, I do have a question
Go
on
ahead.
that. 60 of those felony cases. Do you know the number of people? Because I'm guessing there are multiple cases for one person, or is
Uh,
that
I don't have those numbers in front of me, but it's pretty close.
close?
The hard part about clearance rates, if you really get technical on the clearance rates, you need to have all the court documents on what the convictions were, what they were, all that stuff. And that's not easy to get from the courts a lot of the times. Then I'll end with, since I'm throwing numbers at you. Let me talk about the DUI team. So the DUI team, we haven't really released a whole lot of numbers related to it. But as you know, it was founded this year. We wrote the grant, the behavioral grant to get it. So it's jurisdictional wise, we had the MOU, which you guys all signed off on, which was awesome, which is historic in itself. Never in the county has there been an MOU between all jurisdictions. So that's a feat in itself that we accomplished. But the team has been out 6 times so far this year. We've had 0 crashes, 0 fatalities on our road, and that's ultimately what we want. If you look in comparison, last year Fremont County accounted for 14% of the fatalities on our roadways in Wyoming. This year we're down to 3. So you know what, it's making a difference, and it's not just the DUI team, and then it's everything. The DUI task force that was formed a couple of years. It was formed in 2015. A couple of years ago, we actually started bringing in more resources besides law enforcement, since we knew you can't arrest your way out of this problem. You need to have a lot of extra help. So we brought in prevention folks. We brought in people who specialize in all different areas to how can we deal with it. And you're seeing it's working. And a lot of it is not so much, we believe we're making a difference. We're doing everything we can, but you know what? There's a lot of education. If you've noticed in the last year, 2 years, how much has been out there about, the Safe Rides program, don't drink and drive, get a designated driver. If you ever listen to me on the radio, you're probably sick and tired of me saying that over and over and over. Well, it's actually working. And then the DUI team, we've been out 6 times so far this year. I think I told you before, I've been a part of the DUI task force since 2015. I never seen an event. We had over 100 events before the DUI team went out that we didn't have a DUI. I mean, I've never seen that. It just didn't happen. Well, in the 6 events that the DUI team has been out, we've had 3 nights where we had no DUIs during the night, which is astonishing, but that's ultimately what we want. You know, we're not out there wanting to arrest them. We're just out there to keep our roads safe. And if we run into them, then you know what, they're fair game. But just to kind of throw out, we've been in Lander twice. So in Lander, both nights, we had 0 DUI arrests. So, you know what, on the Lander side, you know, people are doing the right thing. And we're not advertising the DUI team. Like the task force events, we advertise those, but not the DUI team, for the aspect of, you know what, we want folks to do the right thing, and what they're showing us is that they're doing it. But in summation, we're averaging 84 stops per event. So the events run on normally about 7 hours. So as a team, we're averaging 84 stops. The most we had was last weekend. We did a split one last Saturday between Shoshone and Riverton. We had 128 stops in 7 hours out there. It resulted in 0 DUIs, 6 other arrests. Because what we found out with the team is what we already knew, is there's going to be a side effect to it. The side effect is not just DUIs, it's also, we're going to run into a lot of warrants and a lot of wanted people. What we've actually have taken, we've had a few incidences where we've taken some serious people off the streets that were wandering through. We had one here in Lander during our event last month. He was wanted out of Utah for sexually assaulting a child, and he'd been on the run for a while. He just happened to drive through the wrong town at the wrong time. So he's back in St. George now, being dealt with. But the other side of it is calls for service, and just the impact that the team is having in the areas. So to put in comparison, the first event in Riverton averages ballpark 18 calls a night on the weekends. They had 2 calls. So their calls for service were down 90%. The first night. The second event here in Lander, we had 1 call. We were down 90%. So we average about 10 calls when you look at it historically. We had 1 call for service. And Lander is not just the city of Lander. When we come over to Lander, we do from Lander all the way in and encompass Hudson. So we pretty much cover this side of the county. Where in turn, Riverton, the events in Riverton are standalone events, actually in the city of Riverton. We went back to Riverton at the beginning of December. Crime was, you know, they had 5 calls for service, so that was a 63% decrease. Lander, we came back, we had 2 calls. It was the same guy calling in both times. You know, I'd like to put 0, but, you know, officially we had 2. Then Riverton, we actually kind of had an anomaly. On the 12th, we were over in Riverton. Holy cow, was it cold. The wind chill was 35 below 0. But you know what? The young kids worked hard because we stopped 91 cars in 35 below 0 weather that night. Ended up with 3 DUIs, you know, 4 other arrests. But for some reason, they had 11 calls for service. You know, I don't get what happened that night. So that was only 40%. And then Shoshone Riverton, they had 3 calls last weekend. That whole side of the county had 3 calls on a Saturday night, last Saturday, between Shoshone and Riverton. So overall, when the team is out, we're seeing about a 77% decrease in calls for service, and which calls for service, you can equate it to crime too. So when the team is out, you're literally seeing an impact. So the same thing as what we're seeing with high visibility, we're seeing it with the DUI team too. So then I've talked too long. Coming year, things we're going to work on grant wise. There's 4 grants that I'm looking at writing this year. We got a body cam. We need to update our body cams. We thought we had it taken care of, but the contract fell through, which actually is a shining light because now I found a grant to help pay for a little bit more share of what we were going to have to fork up to start with. I still need to, I tried to get the forensic camera last year. There's a forensic camera for detectives. This thing is absolutely just a game changer. It can pick up fingerprints that you can't see with the naked eye. It picks up all types of stuff. It's a neat thing, but I'm not willing to pay $57,000 myself, so we'll see if we can write a grant for it. We do need to write a grant to Homeland Security for, the dog vehicle, for the canine. They bought the last one, would have been 10 years ago now. We're due to get a new one, so they told us to write that grant here. And then project-wise, there's a bunch of things we're working on, but the one thing I do want to put in place is dictation software. For years, I've been looking for it and I can never find anything halfway decent. And then Jake Laura I happened to be walking by and he showed me this device. And this thing is neat. So we're going to try that out because the reason why is we want our officers out on the street. We want them visible. We want to, that's where our crime is. We don't want them having to sit in the office and waste 3.5, 4 hours a day typing reports. Where in turn, if we can get a dictation software in place, then in turn, that should speed up our time of reports and get them back out on the streets where we want them. So. Okay, that was long-winded, so guys.
Questions? Question?
Yeah, thank you. I mean, first a comment, Chief, thank you for this. I really appreciate the data-driven approach that you bring. And there's a lot of numbers here to digest, but it's helpful for us too. I'll just name that about a month or a month and a half ago, there was a very vocal business owner who was chatting around town about the major spike in shoplifting and how bad shoplifting has gotten in Lander and how much worse this year. And I asked the chief what he thought and if that was true. And within 24 hours, he'd gotten me the numbers. Like, nope, there is no spike in shoplifting. Now, I don't know that data changes everybody's minds, including that person, but it was helpful for me in continuing conversations with a lot of folks of like, this is what's happening. This is actually what's happening right now, what's perceived to be happening. So thank you for, this report, that quick response on data on that point. I really appreciate it. I think the question I had, and you probably said this, I maybe just missed it. When you look at the use of force statistic, is the calculation there the 17, so in 2023, 17 incidents against total activity, total calls?
Yeah, total
That is what
activity.
it is. Okay, thanks. Great. I'm sure I'll have other questions, but I'm gonna pause to digest a bit more. Thanks, Mayor. Thanks,
Okay,
Chief.
Thank you. All right. Thanks, Chief.
Mike?
Appreciate it. Okay, moving on. Discussion concerning table ordinance 2024-2. Hunter?
I'm happy to answer any questions about that ordinance. That was the rezoning of 431 Washakie from an R5 into a commercial zone. The planning commission voted 5-1 for a no to change that zone. Staff made a recommendation that said we should. I can read the minutes from the October 19th planning commission with staff notes if that's helpful, but it's in the website too.
Discussion. Council?
And if I can chime in a little bit here, this was presented at the last council meeting for an ordinance. So there are 3 readings and it was tabled. I can't remember why it was tabled, but it was tabled. And so at the next council meeting, it'll either need to be voted to be brought off the table to be able to vote on it for the first reading. Or if you vote to not take it off the table, then it will fail at that meeting.
We don't have to vote it off table. We just don't approve it. To move.
Well, you
forward
have
with
to
it.
make a motion to bring it off the table, and if nobody motions or seconds, then it fails.
Yeah.
Not tonight, at the next
Not
meeting.
tonight.
I
There's no,
hope that was clear. Yeah, tonight is just a discussion. It's not to take it off the table.
okay. Council. You have concerns, John?
Well, I think that the reason that it was tabled is because we had 2 of our council members that for various reasons were unable to attend, and we wanted to hear their feelings on this particular ordinance, and so I guess I'd like to hear from both of them.
Councilman Cox?
Yeah, thank you. So I just had not a long time to review it. What was the reasoning for the 5-1 vote of planning commission? Do we have those minutes or no?
So the minutes are on the website on the October 19th. It doesn't necessarily show the rationale for why the 5-1 was there. It shows who voted which. I think if I remember correctly, it was they felt that a rezone was more permanent than a conditional use, which they felt like could be a more user-based use for that property. And doing more research with that, I don't feel like a conditional use can work for what he's looking to do on this property within our codes currently.
Councilman Stoll?
Thank you, Mayor. Before I share my perspective on this, Hunter, I'm really intrigued by what you just mentioned, because that seems like a key point. So can you tell us more about that research and why you don't think that permit would allow for the use that's being sought?
Sure, just looking through what an R5 can do with unconditional uses. I don't see any uses that show a warehouse or what an HVAC shop would kind of plug into with conditional uses is what there is. There's the only closest thing it kind of talks about is as the planning commission sees fit, or some sort of vague verbiage where they could kind of see that maybe working. But I think personally, I think it's kind of a stretch to what a conditional use is for an R5 from how it's written, by how I read that.
Councilman White?
Hunter, thank you. I appreciate that because that was what I wanted to ask about in our conversation here. Is there a way, what I heard and what you said is you're still not quite sure one way or the other. Is there a way to get a more clear answer and eliminate the gray area about that? Because I think that's potentially impacts how council would vote on it, whether or not a conditional use permit would be the middle ground between what the landowner wants and mitigating community concerns.
And one piece of that, though, is that somebody can make an application and it's truly up to the planning commission to be able to make that determination. It's really not up to Hunter. So Hunter can relay what information he has found, but that doesn't stop the individual from making an application. It certainly doesn't stop the planning commission from voting no or yes based on those factors and what they determine at that meeting.
Thank you. I appreciate the clarification. That helps me reword the question is there a way to better define what constitutes eligible criteria in the conditional use permit? I suspect that means no, we'd actually have to define it by resolution, what constitutes the different terms of acceptable practices, yada, yada. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
I have another
Councilman Cox?
question. Thank you. So in this, as I just look at the land, this would be a spot zone for commercial for just that area. How is it not? Does it cover, is it commercial on both sides of the alley?
Correct. Yeah, spot zoning would be more non-contiguous. But so this, because it is contiguous, is not considered spot zoning.
So the neighbors to the east and west are, what are they zoned?
5.
There are 5.
And so the one property would be commercial? And you would not say that's spot zoning?
Correct. Yeah, because it's contiguous on the south side of the property to commercial zone.
From the alley? The entire street down is commercial? But not on Washakie? Right. That's right. There would be just the
Yeah.
one property on that side. Okay.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
So for clarification, there's one option for him and that is commercial, right?
Not necessarily, because he can always make an application. It just might be denied by the planning commission. So he can make an application for a conditional use permit, but it might be denied. So he has some options. Some are better than others.
Possible options.
Yeah, I mean, everyone has options, but he feels at this time his best option is to make an application for a zoning change. He could make an application for a conditional use permit. Both of them could be denied. Both of them could be approved. We don't know.
Thank you.
Mayor, I have a follow-up.
Councilman Sue, go ahead.
Thanks. Relevant to that point, I don't know that I've seen a conditional use permit in my time on here. I might have, but can you walk us through is there an appeal process to that? So conditional use permit goes to the Board of Adjustment. If they say no, does it end there? What
No,
else?
there's an appeals process. They have due process, right?
Does that appeal come to us?
I believe so.
Thank you.
Councilman Cox?
No, I just think that Councilman Larson just asked sort of what our opinion is. I would need to do just a little bit more checking prior to, because I have a couple of questions that I need to have resolved, but I'm not generally in favor of this type of rezoning as it stands in my view. And also, just because I've been out of the loop just a little bit, did we get any feedback from neighbors?
Mhm.
Okay. For or against?
Most of it.
Most of them are against?
I can read this last
Okay.
couple of paragraphs.
Would you-
that
thank
kinda-
you.
Yeah, of course. It says, City Code 472 states the Planning Commission has the power to hear and make recommendations to the city council on rezoning applications, ensuring that the application is consistent with the adopted master plan. City staff believes the request is consistent with the 2012 master plan, suggesting implementation plan for two related action items, being 1-2, develop a zoning plan that promotes graduated densities and intensities of development with the highest density and intensity in the downtown and the lowest at the edge of the planning area, i.e. adoption of zoning codes that reinforce graduated density and intensity patterns. 3-4, identify opportunities to expand existing industrial sites by rezoning adjacent properties as they become available. City staff received 4 written public comments and 1 petition on the rezoning request. All public comment was against the rezone or the request to change the existing R5 residential zone to C commercial zoning. The application is in order and is consistent with the 2012 master plan and meets all requirements for city codes 432, district zoning map, and 484 amendments zoning map. Yep.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I'll add to that, to those minutes. From what I heard from the last council meeting when this was debated for first reading, there was one gentleman who spoke, who had been opposed, but then is now in favor. So that's worth mentioning, I think, in terms of public comment, but that's read into the record and for the video when you have a chance. I mean, I think Councilman Larson, thank you for asking. I'm glad to have this at a work session. We would have been able to debate it on a couple of readings as well, but nice to be able to chat about it now. The new information tonight about the conditional use permit is something for me to digest, but I have been opposed to this rezoning. Not necessarily on the basis of what the action or the proposal is right now from the existing landowner. But on the basis of what all the other commercial uses then would be allowed in that space. And that while it is contiguous with commercial across an alleyway, it is a strip of R5 that I think is important for us to take seriously, maintaining our residential, especially our high density residential zoning, especially given priorities that we have now that maybe we didn't have in 2012, the council at the time, to actually increase our housing stock in city limits. And so I'm loath to see an R5 unit go to commercial, even though it's consistent with the master plan, because I think those priorities, at least my own priorities, have changed or would be adjusted, I think, if I was voting on that master plan action item now, and which we'll get a chance to do in a year or 2 years. But for me, it's the longer term, it's a permanency of allowing a whole lot of other commercial uses in that neighborhood. And in the facing, across an alleyway, it's commercial, but in the neighborhood itself, then, the residents who are looking at that building and being affected by it, that is a residential neighborhood. I mean, we can all drive down and, past it and take a look. The feel there is residential, and this would be an intrusion into that feel, regardless of what's behind in the alleyway. So the information tonight is something I will chew on, because it had, a conditional use permit would have allayed some of that permanency
concern that I have. And if that's an option, but perhaps not a great option, yeah, something to take into account, for sure. But I don't like the idea of permanently having a commercial property in the middle of that residential, street.
And if you want to, you can look in our ordinances to see what the criteria is to qualify for a conditional use permit. I mean, it's, the criteria is fairly specific.
Mr. Mayor, if I may add, I mean, I have it in front of me right now. It says the board will find that the use is compatible with the character of the area and will not adversely affect the public interest. So, we can all speculate. You can take that, interpret that it doesn't, it's compatible because it's across the alleyway, or it's not compatible. So I think, yeah, it's probably not worth it all speculating what the Board of Adjustment would find there, because you do have their 5-1 vote against the rezoning.
Did you have someone, Councilman?
Well, that was the thing, that really, I guess affected my thinking to start with, is that you've got a 5-1 from the planning commission against it, but you look at what he's doing for the commercial part of it. I mean, yes, he has a garage there that he's doing some business in. It's not something where you've got people driving in and out. It's not a high volume business that is going to increase the traffic in the immediate vicinity. And I was really hoping that the conditional use permit was going to be a little more of an option there. And if that is something that could be, so did I understand that right, Hunter, that the planning commission does have the option of revising or looking at changing the wording on that to make it a little more favorable for that type of zoning?
I'm just gonna pull up the wording that it kind of talks about in conditional use. That just seems like there may be some flexibility there.
Be a stretch on a home business, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I think it says, section C, part 5 says related use is similar type as approved by Board of Adjustment. So
It's really too bad, because I think that the guy is trying to do something that's well worthwhile. He's got a house there. He's wanting to put employees there, which, that's one of the big things that we've been fighting with for forever, is we get people coming to town and where do they live, and this takes care of it. And I struggle.
I totally understand what you're saying. But again, we've been jumping around all over the place. We have to hold to a standard. I mean, we're gonna have to get a little more pinpointed than jumping around like what's taking place. I mean, we need to hold, we're gonna have to do this. And it's not fun, especially when
Time
it's
again.
friends and neighbors and business people. But anyway, thank you.
Anybody else? Yes. Oh, there you are. Okay.
So, John, he has 3 people now living in that house. So he is renting the house out. The concern is if he builds a warehouse right next to the house on the property, the neighbors are not happy about it. I spoke to the neighbors. They don't want that. And I wouldn't either personally if I had a house and lived there for, a long time and then had somebody wanting to build a warehouse right next to my house. It wouldn't be too cool, but he does have a warehouse already out at Ron's Junction and he runs his business out of it and everything. So it's kind of he just wants to move closer into town, so he's not driving back and forth all the time, which I get, I understand that, but I also take into consideration, all of the people living in the neighborhood, nobody likes, well, not a lot of people like, having a business run, with a warehouse right next door to their house, or they wouldn't have bought that property in the first place, I would assume. I would say size and the amount of vehicles going in and out of it, because he's gonna have his business vehicles coming in, getting supplies, going back out. It's not like a store where you're going in and buying the parts. He's got his employees coming in and out of there. It's like any other business, like my cousin owns an electrician business in town, and they're in and out constantly. So, it's not necessarily strangers coming in and out, it's just employees in and out of there.
Okay, you guys ready? No. You good? Nope, nothing to vote on. Always ready. All right, ready for the next thing. I think we're up for you, Rachel.
Thank you. Councilmember Stubble, I know you asked if these would show back up for council to take a look at, and so here they are. I would like to start with the changes that are proposed to Title II, which would be the alcohol and malt beverage sales. What I tried to do was to clean up the original ordinance that detailed all of the different sections. Some of the individual sections have already been amended by various ordinances. So those amendments, if they weren't already part of the main, what I'll call the main ordinance, I tried to put them in so that there would be a comprehensive document that would be up to date. So as we look through that proposal on page 3 in red, under 226 ground for suspension, revocation, or non-renewal of a liquor license, sections C and D in red are proposed, new information, and that would be the addition of including specifically enumerating sales tax holds, that if the clerk receives a sales tax hold from the state of Wyoming indicating that a liquor license holder has not appropriately paid their sales taxes and they're in arrears, then there's a process for what that would look like. Currently, what happens is that I reach out to that holder, I make them aware of the situation, send them a copy of the document. Most of the time, those become current within the week and it becomes a non-issue and we move on. But recently, we've had a couple that were several months. And that would be something perhaps where council would want to take action to suspend their license until they do something to bring that current. So that's proposed wording on how that would work. Anyone have any questions about that?
Nope. Go to the next one.
Okay. Scrolling through that document, and I'm sorry for clarification, I'm looking at ordinance 20-24-XX because I haven't numbered it yet. I'm kind of waiting to see what number we might be on. An ordinance amending Title II, sale, licensing, and use of alcoholic and malt beverages. Then on page 7, some proposed language added to 2-5-1 bar and grill license. And that proposed addition would be the addition of C and then 1, 2, 3 thereunder. That's my suggestion that the council take a look at adopting. Again, we've had a slight discussion about why I'm proposing this change or addition rather. And that being that the legislature last year said, okay, bar and girls, when you go to renew your license, it has to be a 60-40 rule and only alcohol sales can't be any more than 40% of your gross revenue. But we're going to add in entertainment that you can use. It doesn't all have to be food. Some of it can be entertainment, but entertainment can't be adult entertainment or gambling. And adult entertainment is to be defined by the local authority, which is you guys. So those are my proposals. Does anyone have any questions about that?
Councilman Stewart.
Thanks, Mayor. Thanks, Rochelle. This is helpful to have in front of us as well, and great explanation. Just for clarity, so from the legislative direction, it's 60-40, and the entertainment would be a portion of the 60%.
Correct.
Yeah. And then I don't want us to move off bar and grill debate here too quickly, but I thought I saw some edits higher up on page 5.
Okay.
2.2.16, that's in red. Is that for tonight as well, or is that just read from a different version? Restaurant and liquor licenses.
Restaurant liquor licenses.
And our page numbers might be a little off, I think.
Okay.
Page 5 for us.
Red. And what section? I'm sorry.
2-2-16 restaurant liquor licenses.
16.
Is that an edit for us to be looking at too?
And mine isn't in red, so I apologize if yours is in red.
Yeah.
What, could you tell me what? Let me look at it really quick.
1, restaurant liquor licenses shall not sell alcoholic or malt beverages for consumption off the premises. That, I think that's pretty standard, but.
And that might be just updating a prior one.
Second age is updated from 19 years.
Right. So we have updated that language, but it didn't get updated in the main.
Got it.
So it's cleaning it up. Does that make sense?
It does, and so I think, so we're not approving that change in this ordinance, that's already
No.
approved by the council previously.
So that was actually updated by ordinance 20-21 -1 in March. Well, I guess the final reading was in May of 2021. And so my proposed red in there is just to update the current language.
Okay.
That's what the current language looks like in the latest ordinance, even though it didn't.
Yeah.
All the changes didn't make it all the way through in every section.
Great, that makes sense. We're not approving that. That's previously approved.
No, that was previously
Yeah.
approved. We're just incorporating it into the main document and replacing the old language, so it's not as confusing for
Great.
people.
That makes sense. Okay, so back to bar and grill then. I didn't want to move us off that debate.
Because what happens, Councilmember Stubble, sometimes is someone will go to say 211, and that particular section may never have been updated since the original ordinance was enacted. And when you click on that, it pulls up that original ordinance. But then if they read that whole ordinance, it will have old language because it was never replaced and superseded.
Yeah, I appreciate that you're doing this compilation of them.
Trying to.
Most up to date.
This is, I take this kind of the good news, bad news of having adopted Muni Code. Unfortunately, like Muni Code is showing us how many of these little quirky things that are existing. And so going back to the good news, this is helping us clarify that. And every single time we do this, it's mitigating the potential for misinformation and confusion. So.
It's a lot of work, so thank you for doing that, Michelle.
It takes a minute to figure out, hey, well, why does it not read the same every time I pull up 1260, for example?
Well, Mayor, I will say on the top, sorry, on the
Go
topic, the topic at hand of defining entertainment and then excluding adult entertainment from what a bar and grill license holder can allow. I have no problems with the definition that you've proposed here. I like that we're defining adult entertainment in a limiting fashion, in a very specific fashion, but leaving entertainment, the definition there more broad instead of trying to list all the types of entertainment, right? Trivia nights, bands, like we would certainly leave something out. But we know we want to be very detailed and specific about adult entertainment since that's what we're prohibiting. as is wise. I will say as a little commentary, if I may, that I'm a little surprised the legislature did not define this for us. Frankly, it seems like the definitions are pretty standardized across our communities, but it's in front of us to do, this definition works for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay,
The second proposed ordinance I wanted to discuss with you concerns ordinance. It's also 2024-XX, but amending Title 12, City Administrative Provisions. This one had a few more updates to make, as if you click on it, for example, 12.1.3 council meetings that had been updated by ordinance 12.18. And so that's in red and the old one is in green with a strikeout, just to bring that document completely current. On page, I think this would probably be page 3, 12.2.7 municipal judge. This is the provision that required our municipal judge to have a bond in the amount of $10,000. My proposal, and it's somewhat incomplete, and I do apologize for that. I was waiting for a few more pieces of information to come through, is that we add some staff to that requirement, and that is driven by Wyoming state statute, which is 38, let me find it for you. 38.2.101, which requires custodians of governmental funds to furnish a bond in the amount, this says required by law, but I couldn't find any specific law on what those amounts would be for our situation. And a custodian is any person who is an account signatory for a governmental entity or a person with physical custody or access to financial assets. And Councilmember Hans, you may remember when we went through the public officer training together, they touched on this, and I made a note that we might update our statute to reflect those requirements. I did check with the city insurance carrier, Tagler, and the city does have insurance that would cover employee theft up to a $500,000 limit. And also they would cover forgery or alteration with a $100,000 limit. So with that coverage in mind, that might change the amount of a bond requirement that the council may think is appropriate. That being said, the mayor is a signatory. The council president can be in his absence or her absence. Currently, the municipal judge is already required to be bonded. Although it's not spelled out anywhere, the municipal court clerk carries a bond. Shari, the city treasurer, carries a bond. I am a signatory, so I should be bonded. Our deputy clerk, he's not a signatory, but one could certainly argue he has access to city funds, as he does all the accounts receivable and payroll and things of that nature. The police chief, and really when you go down that line, you know, our water utility clerk, our parks and rec, gal who takes in all of the ice skating funds. So knowing that we have coverage for theft, it might be my recommendation that those bonds be more de minimis, less in the amount, comply with the statute, but maybe not as much as Shari's is, for example. Which Shari, yours is 100,000, is that correct? Questions? Adam, would you want to weigh in?
Rochelle did a good job.
I appreciate that. Yeah, for the record, I would mention, you know, Evanston has not quite as many people set forth, and their bond amounts are in the range of $10,000. I don't know that that's necessary. I might recommend more like 5,000, knowing that we have insurance coverage elsewhere. My recollection is that, you know, the city is required to pay for these bonds, and being mindful of those expenses as well. I believe, and Shari, you might correct me if I'm wrong, a $10,000 bond costs around $100.
My bond is $950 a year for $100,000.
Adam, have you run across anything where you've had this in your discussions with other municipal attorneys?
No, no. I think what Rochelle's come up with, I think is a good plan, especially if our insurance is going to cover a lot of this stuff. I think having a small bond for some of these folks so that we are at least covered would be very helpful.
The other change in this document is the park rules, 1233, just updating it to our newest change on that. So I just wondering if council thinks 5, 10, just a general discussion of what you feel would be appropriate and like to see, if anything.
Mayor, I think $10,000, the minimum is appropriate. No.
Okay. All right, I will make those changes and bring them back before you. If anyone has any questions in the meantime, please feel free to reach out.
Okay, before we leave, Joan asked us, at the beginning of the meeting, talk about, banners and MOU and stuff. If I recollect right, and Henry, you can help me if I mess up, but we did that MOU with the school district because their insurance then covers any accidents or anything that happens, not ours. And that was one of the big pushes, am I right, Adam?
The big issue before was who was going to bear some of the liability cost for the banners being hung on there if they broke or if they fell off and hit somebody or caused damage to a vehicle. And city didn't necessarily want to bear that liability. And so what we did is work out with that MOU with the schools that the school will bear that liability. They'll provide the insurance for it.
Does that help? Okay. Anybody else? Yes, go ahead.
If I could go back to the update, I wanted to verify it was okay to share this. I just got word back from Kyle Butterfield. So the Fremont Air Service team continues to work with SkyWest and State Aeronautics, and we are gaining some traction about getting the return of the second flight on a more regular basis. So we're not there yet. We're actually a long way from that, but at least the conversations are happening and we're a little more confident that that will in fact come to pass. So keep your fingers crossed for that. We know folks want that.
Hunter, before I forget, thank you for this evening. I didn't tell you that when you got done, but don't want to leave you out. So thank all you guys. Thank you guys, and let's call her a night.